Boom. So we're live. Dream Team back in business. I got my good mate Jamie from Punch Perfect Boxing. How are you doing, mate?
I'm all good, thanks, mate. Thanks for having me. First, it's been a while.
It's been a couple of months now, hasn't it? I think it was the start of Jan. I think it was before Eubank and Smith even fought. So a while.
Yeah, I thought it was just after Christmas was kind of my rough guess when we last spoke. So yeah, it's been a while.
It's been a while, and as always is the case, when it's been a while, there's a lot to talk about. And in the great world that is boxing, everything seems to change week by week. So we got a good few things to talk about in this video, but I think because we're in fight week, because it's a fight that on paper should be straightforward, but there's a lot of pressure to perform well, pressure to look good. We're obviously talking about Anthony Joshua versus Jermaine Franklin. And it's interesting, right? You know, when they were talking about AJ coming back, it wasn't even just opponents. They were mentioning the OVO Arena in Wembley, which is a good arena. But for Joshua, you were thinking when you heard that, that's quite small. But here in the O2, is it even filled out yet? And the rumor I'm hearing is that they may end up having to close the top section just to actually reach capacity, which is unheard of, really, if you'd said that a couple of years ago about Anthony Joshua. So, I guess my question is, what are your thoughts on AJ Franklin? Is Joshua under increasing pressure to perform well? Because a win's a win, but against someone like that, you're expecting a good performance. And what are your thoughts on the O2 potentially having to actually close a section off just to have it sold out? Is it rumor?
Firstly on the attendance and the venue, I mean, for anyone that's been to the O2, that just sounds mental that they'd have to close the top for an Anthony Joshua show. Like, that almost feels inconceivable. And does it speak to where Joshua's at in his career? Does it speak to kind of the economical climate as well? But we saw in December that Fury was able to do decent numbers against Derek Chisora of all people in a stadium. So who knows?
People,
Yeah, it's just really interesting to kind of find that out. Will it sell out by the weekend? We'll wait and see. But in terms of the pressure on Joshua, I completely agree with you. And I said in my own preview that I do think that perhaps the pressure is on more than ever, because that Andy Ruiz defeat, he was still young enough. It didn't feel like he was anywhere near the end, even if he did lose that rematch. And perhaps Ruiz was just his kryptonite in some way. The Usyk rematch, he wasn't the favourite going into it, and most boxing fans thought he was going to lose anyway. A lot of people thought the Robert Garcia move had come too late. He just couldn't turn it around. So the pressure wasn't quite there. There was for the Ruiz rematch, but not quite this pressure. I mean, if he loses to Jermaine Franklin, he's not at the top level anymore, and it's a massive drop off. So it would be, Eddie Hearn keeps referring it to as crunch time, make or break, and things like that. And that's a lot of pressure to put on Joshua, but I think it's fair pressure, because if you don't deliver against Jermaine Franklin, it's all right not to deliver against Alexander Usyk, but to not deliver against Jermaine Franklin is another thing altogether.
Yeah, before I chop in on that, thank you to C. Gary for the £4.99. Appreciate that.
Appreciate it, mate.
He has the pressure to look good. He's carrying the network of the zone now at this point. Certainly in the UK, he is the standard bearer for the zone. And as you say, he's under pressure not just to win, but to win impressively. Win emphatically, I think, is the word. Because he's changed things up. He's got another new trainer now in Derek James, which I think will be a good fit. He's not showing a lot of his training footage. He's not really been shown anything, which is something that he's not really done over the years. You always kind of see this, that, and the other from Joshua. So he's really going into this fight with a point to prove. He's spoken and said, I think he said with IFL, that if he loses, it's retire. Essentially, I'm paraphrasing there, but it's essentially that's what he's saying, because he knows himself that Jermaine Franklin, no disrespect, isn't a world level operator. It's all right. He's all right, but he's just like that. All right. If you can't beat him, or if you're struggling with him, they're essentially one and the same, aren't they?
Yeah, 100%. And it's not just the pressure on him to perform in the sense of, like you say, the zones kind of, he's carrying that platform here in the UK, even worldwide to an extent as well. That kind of bears on his shoulders a little bit. And for his own career, all these type of things are obviously pressures, but also he needs to perform just for himself. for his confidence, for future performances, for future big fights. He looks like he's been lacking a bit of self-belief recently. We've seen a bit of a collapse in the post-fight interview after Usyk as well. And there's just been these moments every couple of years now. Firstly, Klitschko, then Ruiz, and now Usyk, where I think he's lost a little bit. And I think whilst there's this pressure for him to get back to the top and win more world titles and be involved in big fights and make DAZN loads of money, make Eddie Hearn loads of money, get loads of views for DAZN, all of that is a pressure. But the real pressure is on himself, that if you do want to go and fight Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, Joe Joyce, any of these big names, you can't go into those fights having just gone 12 rounds with Jermaine Franklin or getting dropped or hurt by Jermaine Franklin or not looking good against Jermaine Franklin. You've got to spark Jermaine Franklin. So I think he needs this for himself just as much as he needs it for DAZN, Matchroom, etc. as well.
For himself, if he could go in there and pre-champion Joshua, just go run through him like he was doing all those years ago, that would be such a boost to his confidence. Because as you say, he's lacking it. And I think it's Stevie Wonder could see he's lacking confidence at this point. And some would argue that it goes back as far as Klitschko. You know, Ruiz just exasperated it by knocking him out the way he did. Because he's fought very safe since then. Going into the Usyk rematch, he spoke several times going into that about how he's got the dog in him now. You know, he's a new man. But again, he went in there with Usyk and he was too afraid to let the shots go. You know, he was better, but he was still too afraid to let the shots go. He can't be like that in this fight. It's certainly not against someone like Franklin. Like the caliber, I mean, like it's not Usyk. It's not close.
Yeah, and if I don't know if you kind of remember, Eddie Hearn has said this. He kind of brings it up occasionally. I've never actually heard Joshua really allude to it himself, but Eddie Hearn has said that in conversations with AJ in the past, after that Klitschko fight, he almost said to himself that he can't be involved in many more of them because he won't have a long sustained career and his health long term as well won't be sustained. So I do think subconsciously that Klitschko fight has always played on his mind. I think he started to forget it a little bit. And against Ruiz, I think he was just a bit too lackadaisical. He almost went the other way and just thought we could bowl through him. And then it was almost that reminder against Ruiz that this could happen to me at any moment. And I think that plays on his mind now more than actually going in for the kill. So I think he needs to get that back. And like you say, he needs to run through Jermaine Franklin. And it's not also just about this performance. I think this year in general, I said in my preview, I think 2023 is such an important year for AJ. And if he takes on slightly lesser fights in order to get prepared for 2024 and go in against the Wilders, etc., I would understand it, because you look at the early part of his career, bowling through everyone, fighting every couple of months, different arenas, different parts of the country, knocking through people, confidence was high. He ain't had that in an awfully long time, and I think it's reflecting in his performances. And all this trying to improve and become a better boxer, all of that's great, but sometimes you need to accept what you are. And that's an incredible athlete that punches hard, and you need to get back to that.
Very physically strong, good on the inside. Yeah, put you at more of a risk, but it's what you're good at.
Yeah, exactly.
What you said there about this year being an important year for Joshua, it is. There's no doubt about that, it is. But what I'm not liking is I'm hearing Eddie Hearn mention Tyson Fury before he's even fought Jermaine Franklin. Where's the whole rebuilding process if we're already hearing Fury, Wilder getting mentioned? We haven't even had his first comeback fight yet. Yeah. So we're on the rebuilding process, but at the same time, you're mapping out Fury, then Wilder, then maybe Usyk again. It's like one fight isn't rebuilding. And Joshua certainly can't just have one fight and then boom, he's back to his old self. It's not going to work like that.
And what happened to the end of last year when Eddie was saying, no, he'll fight 3 times next year. He just needs to be active again, and then we'll put him in with a big fight. Why has that suddenly gone out the window just because the circumstances are changing a little bit? Your talk was you'd fight. They even said December last year, we want to try and get out. That obviously moved into this year. We want to go again in the summer against a Dillian White type name, and then we'll try and get out in December again. If the December fight is a slightly tougher one, then fair enough, because you would have had those 2 warm-up fights. But getting with a new trainer shouldn't be a one-and-done fix. He needs to be with Derek Jones for a couple of fights to kind of build up that confidence and remind people in the division why they should be scared of AJ, because I don't think a lot of heavyweights still have that same fear with AJ anymore.
They look at him as much of a case of, if I can land on you, I'm going to win. Kubrat Pulev is someone who, ever since he fought Klitschko, seemed to be very reluctant to go into the trenches. But against AJ, he was trying his best to just throw big shots at him, because he obviously saw what happened in the Ruiz fight, was thinking, I can do that. So people look at AJ and they're like, I can take you into deep waters, I can drown you. Yeah. There's not that fear factor there.
Yeah, and I think people are more willing to take an AJ fight now because they know if they only need one chance, and if they take it, then they can come out a victory. It's not an Alexander Usyk where you have to be absolutely perfect to try and get it right. AJ, you need one opportunity like Andy Ruiz did, and it can just change a fight. His legs
Yeah.
may never get back underneath him. Mentally, it may go a little bit, and he might be quite fragile. You just need one chance with AJ. And I think a lot of people look at that rather than thinking about AJ just needing one chance to put you away. Like people used to look at AJ. It used to be, if AJ catches me, I could go here. They don't
Yeah.
really have that fear anymore. They more think about how they can hurt AJ.
And that's dangerous. If you are AJ, people are going in there looking to try and take your head. They always were, but they're looking really now to try and do it.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of AJ with this new style where he's boxing a lot more, he's thinking about defense, great for longevity, not great viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that ever since the Ruiz fight where he fought, let's be frank, he fought safety first to a T. He did not want to even dare engage him. Ever since then, the fans, just from an entertainment point of view, have seemed to be a bit more. They gave him a pass against Parker, but after Ruiz, it was just like, nah, we don't want to see this. And I think that's playing partially a part why we're potentially seeing the O2 having to close the sector off just to get full. Which again, even just saying that for Joshua, it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I said in my preview that he hasn't absolutely obliterated someone in years. I mean, Eric Molina was the last person he stopped inside 6 rounds. I mean, AJ, it used to almost be when you bet on him, you bet on 1 to 6 because that's when he gets rid of his opponent. So he hasn't done that in a long time. He doesn't quite have that almost wilder value to him at the minute where someone's just going to be laid out on the canvas. And I think that's, like you say, is probably starting to show with AJ a little bit.
It's crazy. It's crazy. In terms of this fight, I personally do think, I haven't done a prediction video, but obviously I'm going with AJ. I personally do think that we will actually finally see him get an early stoppage. But I think I think people are going to be surprised by the first round or two, how cagey it'll be. I don't think AJ's going to start, hell for leather. But I do think he's going to take Franklin out. And I think he'll take him out within the first 5 to 6 rounds.
Yeah, that's the prediction that I've gone with as well. Just looking at his build for this fight as well, notice that he's adding on a bit more bulk, and it seems to have gone to his shoulders more than ever before.
Yeah.
There was a point, Ruiz won especially, where his arms were just huge, and it looked like it was making him sluggish. The small training bits we've seen is kind of the chopping the tree and trying to be really explosive with that action. I think he is training to get rid of this guy really, really early, so I do think he'll go for it, but it needs to come from that jab, I think. I think he's neglected that the last couple of years, and that used to be his weapon to kind of unlock his opponent and then tee up the big right hand.
He's neglected that. And, there's certain things that his arsenal doesn't use enough. Like the uppercut is one of his better punches, underrated punch. And he never, even against Alexander Usyk, he was reluctant to use it. And when he did, it was sloppy, hold Usyk and then trying a little uppercut. And it didn't do anything.
Yeah,
I think we're going to see a very explosive Joshua in this fight. We're going to be interested to see what he weighs.
Yeah,
that's the real interesting thing, because I've always felt that a lighter Joshua is a better Joshua, but it's the kind of it's frustrating because we have a history of people putting on weight after a loss and stuff like that, and it not working. And of course, the first thing people always do after a loss is got to put weight on. And has it worked in the past? No. So why is it going to work now?
Yeah, and he obviously slimmed down a lot as well because he was fearful of going for the kill early, not getting rid of him, and then gassing a little bit like he did against Klitschko, like happened against Ruiz. I think he's had that fear for a while now, and that's why he did slim down. Also, to obviously box for 12 rounds against Ruiz is why he took all the weight off. But really and truly, when AJ has been putting people away and has been his most successful in his career, has been when he's been heavy. So like I say with AJ, sometimes you need to accept what you're better at, and he's a better athlete than he is a boxer in terms of pure ability, and that's fine. So lean on the thing you're better at. Why would you try and lean on your skills that you're still developing? You admittedly, can't compete with Usyk. You may not be able to compete with Fury as well if you ever take him on. So lean on the things that make you good. Deontay Wilder's not going to go out there and try and outbox someone for 12 rounds. He's going to throw big punches because that's what he does. Joshua needs
and
to
he knows
the
that.
same. Yeah, exactly.
Wilder is the kind of case where, for all his flaws, he's accepted that. He's accepted that I'm just going to look and knock you out with one shot. I know you're a better boxer than me. I'm not going to try and shy away from it. I'm just going to try and knock you out with one shot. And he always does, well, nearly always does.
Yeah, exactly.
In terms of the undercard, what are your thoughts on the undercard? Because, one criticism of Joshua over the years, I know, has been his undercards tend not to be the best. And this one, well, it's not looking the best. In fact, that's being very generous. It's damn.
Yeah, and the thing is with AJ undercards in the past, whilst, like you say, most of them I've always been critical of, I have always understood, though, that it's AJ in the main event. He's either defending his world titles or trying to win them back, or he's trying to unify them. And the heavyweight division is the glamour division. So sometimes I can understand that a paying customer is usually the casual fan for an AJ fight, and they just want to see the main event. They don't particularly care about the undercard. So I can understand the way that promoters have approached it in the past. But I think for this card, it's a little bit different. You're back at the O2 Arena. You're struggling to sell by all accounts. AJ doesn't have a world title. Jermaine Franklin is not a premier opponent. You need a slightly stronger undercard, in my opinion. And just looking at it, there's not one fight that screams out to me on there. And it's not even, sometimes on these cards, they'll throw in a really good domestic fight at English or British level that perhaps people doesn't get the wider attention, but we know it's a good fight on there. Hasn't even got anything like that on it. It's just loads of mismatches. So I'm not happy with the undercard, I must say.
This is where the Lerone Richards, the Joshua Boatzis of the world, that's where we're starting to miss them.
Yeah.
Because these will be the guys where cheap and cheerful, there you go. Maybe put them in a fight for a British title, defend this or something. Cheap and cheerful, there you go. There's an undercard filler.
Yeah, and I know Craig Richards, obviously, Bolotniks was supposed to be on this and that fell through. But even with that on top of it, it doesn't necessarily change things. And AJ undercards always had a Callum Smith or someone like that was or an Olympian or someone that you were looking forward to seeing. I know a Coley, we don't look forward to seeing him, but he was seen as the next guy breaking through to win a world title. It always have someone that it was a good exposure for them and a good platform for them. I look at this undercard and there's no real prospects that actually stand out to me on it either. And again, that's just another factor where I think, like you say, the talent's probably being spread a little bit thin in this country to be able to put on a decent undercard.
Yeah, Felix Cash being the co-main event. And, I've been proven wrong by Felix Cash. Although, against Denzel Bentley, looking who was in his corner makes you think. Just gonna say, Felix Cash was never really one of the more renowned, it's fair to say, of the Rio squad. He's co-main event. That's desperate times.
Against a 43-year-old that's fought outside of Italy twice and lost both times that he's fought outside.
And Ammo Williams is on the undercard. Why aren't they just fighting?
Yeah, and the fight Ammo Williams in against River Wilson Benn, he's going to get absolutely annihilated. There's no point. I don't get it.
One of the weaker undercards I've seen. It really is. And again, they've never been great, but you look at the Usyk undercard. You had a Coley defenders world title. It was a mismatch. Callum Smith against Lennon Castillo.
Yeah.
I mean, at least they bring something to the table. At least you get Callum Smith, big bam drama. Lawrence Coley, well, at that time he was knocking people out. Now he's just putting people to sleep, but not in the way we think of it. You sitting watching.
Even Callum Smith, on that card, he made his light heavyweight debut against Lennon Castillo, and he got one of the best knockouts of the year. You come away from that, you might have not been too looking forward to it beforehand, but if you tuned into that show, you would have been like, all right, Smith looks pretty good at light heavyweight. It's a big knockout. It's a memorable moment. I can't see anything this Saturday that is going to make me come away thinking that, because there's no real story or narrative there for me to get excited about any of those fights.
No. And, I think that this is the knock-on effect to a lot of these guys going their own way, going their separate way and signing with Sky and whoever they go with. And I think at the time, maybe Eddie Hearn was kind of like, look, they can go, they can do what they want. And, obviously with a Cody was a bit more animosity, but we're seeing the residual, the trickle-down effect. These undercards, a lot weaker because there's just not any guys there to fill them. A lot of them have gone off. And like I said, you get guys like Lerone Richards. He's never going to be a stadium filler. He's never going to be a massive headline act in pay-per-view. But IBO title, solid co-feature. There you go. Joshua Boazzi, maybe fight for a European title, a world title eliminator against Jean Pascal. There you go. Solid co-main event. We don't have that now.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not just Eddie that feels the effects of it. A lot of Sky cards, I think, outside of Smith Eubank, most of the Sky cards have been pretty rubbish as well. So they're
Well, that
kind
Sky
of
card of the weekend was absolutely abysmal.
dreadful. Yeah,
It
awful.
was. I'm sure Eddie Hearn giggled his heart out, probably still giggling now over that
Yeah,
Sky card.
yeah, I can imagine.
Speaking of the Sky card, I mean, Lawrence Okoli, there are ways you can, as Callum Smith showed, way you can show yourself to the world scene in a new division, you know, and you're moving up. Lawrence Okoli has the chance now. He's in there against David Light, who's not that good, new broadcaster, new promoter, and he goes and does that.
Yeah. And it didn't look great with all the people in the background walking out. And I've not seen any positive talk about it. I saw today that Lawrence Okoli went on Sky News and actually spoke about potentially making himself available to jump in at the end of May at the Bournemouth Stadium to fight Chris Billam-Smith, or he said he'd fight Riakporhe on that card. And I saw some people saying he won't go out again that soon, but I think he's probably seen the backlash and thought, I'm a little bit embarrassed here. I need to get out again in a big fight and prove to these people that I am the best cruiserweight, because I certainly didn't prove it on the weekend. And it's all well and good saying, if you think you can beat me, come and fight me, but people aren't going to pay to watch you. And that's the thing with Lawrence Okoli.
No.
If I got given tickets for free to one of his fights, I don't think I'd bother going, because I just know that I'm not going to be entertained. So I don't know how he sells tickets in this country unless it is Riakporhe or Billam-Smith.
I think they're the only fights that make sense for him. Like, as much as I'd love to see him in unifications, how are you ever going to entice one of the champions when they're going to want however much money? The promoters know, or Ben Shalom is obviously not stupid. He knows, look, he's not going to recoup any of that money. You know, you have to put him in a small arena because that arena looked dead. People know with Lawrence Okoli, you know, he's had more stinkers than many people have had hot dinners.
Yeah.
And if you're an away fighter, you're looking and you're seeing a guy manhandle these guys and the referee doing absolutely nothing about it, and you're thinking as well, I don't want that. I don't want to go in there, try and win, and a referee just lets him maul me for 12 rounds. So how are you going to entice a Gulamari, and how are you going to entice a Jay Apataya to come to the UK and fight Lawrence Okoli?
Exactly. And I also think for Lawrence, he probably looks at it like, I haven't lost many rounds as a pro, and I've never really looked in danger of losing a fight. So why would I change things up? And I can understand that some fighters just aren't particularly pretty to watch, and perhaps it is better for you to not change your style, so you just keep on winning. But in terms of entertainment and ultimately in boxing, I think the goal for most people is to make their money while they can, rather than win belts a lot of the times nowadays. For Lawrence Okoli, and listen, Sky have chucked a lot of money at fights and fighters, perhaps overpay him for a lot in their first sort of 18 months with Boxer. But surely they're not stupid enough to just keep losing money on Lawrence Okoli. I mean, Eddie Hearn did the O2 Arena against Sejlak on a Sunday. We talk about AJ potentially not having that upper bowl field. I mean, that card was
bad.
That was half empty in there. So you will lose money on Lawrence Okoli if you don't put him in those big fights. But why would anyone want to come over to the UK when I'm sure Riakporhe wants his own shot? I'm sure Billam-Smith wants his own shot, and they're more winnable and more exciting fights for the other champions.
I know, and you know, it was funny to me that Okoli said that Ben Shalom wants him to be the face of boxing on Sky. I wonder, does he still want that now?
Why would you want him?
Why would you even say that? Like, you're going to be the face of boxing on Sky. Tough times, is it? Really? Okoli?
You also promote Billam-Smith and Riakporhe, so why would you sort of alienate them almost to say that, no, Okoli's our guy at cruiserweight, like he would want him to be the face of Sky? You should probably want Riakporhe too, because he actually knocks people out and looks a little bit more exciting doing it.
Has a bit more personality to him as well.
Exactly.
I wonder about Okoli, right? Look, I followed him as an amateur. I was never impressed by him, right? I'll just admit that. When he turned over pro, I thought nothing of him because I wasn't impressed with him as an amateur. Erislandy Savon knocked him out in a round pre-Rio. At Rio, I think he dropped him 2 or 3 times in that fight. Okoli saw the final bell. Not an indication, and he was in his mid-20s at the time. It's not an indication he's got a particularly sturdy chin. Do you think at this level now he's starting to realise, even at British level, having almost flashbacks to the amateurs and maybe some issues he's had in the gym and thinking, oh, I'm back here again. I don't want that. Grab. I can do it now. I'm in the pro games. Kind of Klitschko-esque. You know what Klitschko would be. Vladimir, after all the knockouts, he was like, right, grab hold. They let me away with it. And that's almost essentially what we're getting with Okoli. Do you think that some of the residual damage from the amateurs is starting to creep into his psyche now.
I think that's 100% the case. I know from first-hand accounts that in the GB setup when he was there were certain times that he wouldn't be allowed to spar some of the heavyweights because he was taking a bit of a pasting or getting hurt in sparring. So I know that in the amateurs, he did get rocked quite a few times, as you mentioned, by Savon as well, where he took a real pasting. And the way in which he's just... It's not like some fighters where it gets awkward and gets in close and they start to hold. Okolie will look for the opportunity to do it whenever a fighter looks like they're in a position to attack him. There are times where he almost steps in to clinch an opponent, and it's like he almost looks so afraid of it. And against Sejlak, I think that was why it was one of his toughest fights, because there were moments where he almost saw himself being clipped, and Sejlak was physically strong enough to kind of get out of those clinches. So I do think Okolie does have a bit of that Vladimir fear almost, where I've got a bit of PTSD almost, where I've been hurt in the amateurs, and I'm a bit worried that that's going to happen again. And if I'm not negative, I could get rocked at any moment.
I think that spells disaster for him at heavyweight, though, because 100%. Vladimir was a 6'6", 245-pound heavyweight against much smaller guys, much smaller. Okolie is one of the most physically strong cruiserweights, but therein is the word cruiserweight. He's going to go up to head. Could you imagine, hypothetically speaking, he's WBO champion. He moves up to heavyweight. They mandate him to fight Joe Joyce for the interim title. I mean, good luck trying to do that to Joe Joyce.
Yeah, and I don't think Okolie's going to fare particularly well at heavyweight either, because I don't think he's actually the puncher people believe him to be. I know people have him down because he's so big and he has had some brutal knockouts, and I do think if he can just tee off on a guy, he will put them away. But I think the power's a little bit overrated. There's been a few occasions now. Yeah, there's been a few occasions where I've just thought, surely some of these opponents that have taken these shots aren't just ridiculously tough. I do think his power is somewhat overrated, and some of it speaks to the level of opposition that he's faced, because some of his most brutal knockouts, an incredibly washed Glowacki, Prazovic, useless, that Jazuski as well that he fought when Glowacki pulled out on short notice on the AJ Pulev card.
There was a guy he knocked out in 2 or 3 rounds, and Chamberlain knocked him out in a round. And Chamberlain's not a puncher.
Yeah,
that was the guy in the
useless.
AJ Usyk card.
So it's just like, yeah, there's been a couple of times now with Okolie where I question his power a little bit as well, moving up to heavyweight.
That's going to be interesting. I cannot see him doing anything at heavyweight. That's just me personally. Like, I mean, I know people like Hatman have said they can see it. I can't. I think that literally every advantage he has is gone at heavyweight, and then you're just left with the basic Lawrence Okolie. And as I said, when I seen him in the amateurs, I was like, there's nothing that is impressive at all about this guy. And I think that's literally what we're going to get at heavyweight. We're going to get the amateur Lawrence Okolie, where it's just like, there's nothing there. Yeah. You know, there's literally nothing. It's a good question there by Adam. Who would you call Sky's face of boxing? I'd probably say Adam Azim at this point.
Yeah, in terms of the future, I mean, the guy...
They really don't have anybody, really.
Yeah,
Adam Azim probably be the main guy.
They don't have a Tyson Fury and AJ. They don't have that sort of flagship star that they can run with. So it is a good question. Maybe even look towards, I know, the sort of female aspect. For a while they were kind of running with Savannah Marshall for a little while again, but they don't have that heavyweight. They don't have that big name quite yet. They've managed to accumulate a lot of decent talent, but no real elite talent just yet. So I think that's one of the things that's been tricky for them.
It's been tricky for them, and you know, it's looking at Sky Boxer Ben Shalom now. It's a strange one, because, you know, for me, I think it's good having more promoters, having more networks, more variety. But they are got to be, people talk about their own hemorrhaging money. Sky have got to be taking serious L's on these shows. I'd say the only show they've actually made a profit on would probably be Smith Eubank.
Yeah, because that was packed out, and Smith sells a lot of tickets and stuff. And I think that done well, but. I mean, Sky to me almost feel like they're... Sky
Ben
to
Whittaker.
me, or not for me currently, because he hasn't been fighting. He hasn't fought enough to for it to be Ben Whittaker just yet, I don't think. But Sky almost feel like they've done these one-off fights quite well. So these Khan Brooks, the Marshall versus Shields, Smith versus Eubank, they've done these one-off events almost that feel quite big, and they've done quite well. But the regular Saturday night fight nights, they've been very poor because the undercards haven't really supported them in any way.
I'd love to know who's in charge of actually finding the away opponents for Sky.
Yeah.
Because Adam just says Fraser Clark. I doubt very much Fraser Clark is going to have much of a career. No offense to the guy. He was 270, who looked awful in that fight. But they are literally getting the scraping of the barrel as away opponents for these guys.
Yeah.
Like, they're so bad, even the boxers are like, well, what's going on here? So there's a lot of people. There is a lot of problems with Sky, I think. And I think it's because Sky are very good, for want of a better word, shining a turd.
Yeah.
They do a great job in production. They do a great job in the marketing to an extent. So they kind of they take away kind of with the zone. It's a bit more in your face when it's a bad card. Everyone sees it because it's not done to the same extent as Sky. But these Sky cards have been very poor. The matchmaking has been awful, and these shows now, you don't look at them and think, "Oh, Sky show's coming." You're just kind of like, "Oh God, one fight and that's it."
I think a lot of people, a lot of promoters in this country could learn from what Queensberry have done over the past 12 months, and that's almost invest in divisions. So if you look at them at super bantamweight, where they've had Andrew Kane, Liam Davis, Brad Foster, and they've been putting them all in with Ian Baluta, and they've all resulted in decent fights and decent watches. At middleweight, there's Denzel Bentley, there's Hamza Shiraz. There's a couple of names there as well where they consistently match them and just use them as undercard fillers almost.
Heavyweight now, young Moses Atuma.
Yeah, Moses Otoma, and you've obviously got Dubois, Joyce, Fury, all at heavyweight as well. So what Queensberry have done quite good is just going into certain divisions, accumulating a talent, and they'll find an away opponent like a Baluta that they can consistently match their guys against. And they've been fortunate as well, Queensberry. I think they've had a few names break through, like Nick Ball, etc., that have been able to kind of top up their undercards as well. So Queensberry, I think in terms of actual strength of cards at the minute, Queensberry are actually in the UK the ones that are putting on the most sort of watch-worthy cards from 7 p.m. through to the main event at the minute.
I agree with that, actually, because even some of the cards that on paper don't look good, you end up having some good fights. Like, I remember Warren put a card on a couple of months ago now. I think it was in York Hall one Friday, and I think it was the case if there's not much on, we'll watch this. I think Nicky Ball was headlining, and it was a great card. I mean, it was literally every fight on it was like, it was a memorable fight. Actually, it might have been Denzel Bentley, Marcus Morrison, but every fight was good. And it was like, he's not even trying to put a good card on, and it became good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because he has the fighters in it, and he's matched them in such a way that you're just getting good fights.
Yeah. And you use opponents that you find out are reliable from abroad, like a Baluta, and then you get them in consistently with guys that you've got in that division from the UK. And people will want to tune in and watch. So they go, actually, I'll watch that guy. I watch Baluta beat Brad Foster. I watch Baluta against Mick Conlon on a BT card. So I'm going to watch him against Liam Davis and Andrew Kane. Eventually, you actually get a really good fight against Andrew Kane. So I think Queensberry have gone about it the right way by mopping up domestically and kind of finding out who those opponents abroad are that we can keep bringing over.
I think as well, it shows the experience of Warren over Hearn and over Ben Shalom especially. Hearn, he took over Matchroom over a decade ago from his dad, and Warren has just been consistently at it, and he's learned over the years, this is how, even in his darkest times, the Box Nation days, he knows this is how you build a stable, and this is how you do it, which is probably why he's been able to survive as long as he has. And I think at the minute now, if you look at, it's not always the case with his cards, but in depth, he probably can put on the stronger, more enticing undercards, maybe is a better word.
Yeah, I completely agree.
In terms of fights that we're getting teased, because, well, from what I'm hearing, it's not a tease, it's on. June, the month of June the 3rd to be exact, in the UAE. Conor Benn, Chris Eubank Jr. It looks like it is going to happen after all. At a full 160, though, this time. No catch weights or BS rehydration clause. That escalated quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, it's I remember back in October when it fell through, and I said my fear is that this fight will happen next summer. And I mean, it's just played out. It's like, I mean, whilst this is obviously me and you were recording, I actually put a video out just before we went live, entitled "Idiots Abroad." Eubank versus Benn is back on, and I can't lie, I don't really care about the circumstances in which it's under. For me, the fact that we're going to be 8 months on in June from Conor Benn failing 2 drugs tests and not being proven innocent, all he's done is create a reason to doubt it. And it's up to you whether you want to follow the doubt or whether you want to follow the fact that he failed 2 drugs tests. And for me, it's just become very I've almost become desensitized to the fact of him fighting. The one saving grace for me is thank goodness that Manny Pacquiao isn't being dragged out of retirement. Thank goodness for that. I think that's a real positive. But for me, this fight was all about the legacy of their families, the rivalry between their families, and it was supposed to belong over here in the UK. It's now gone to the Middle East, and often when a fight goes to the Middle East, if someone says to you, G-Man, why has that fight gone to the Middle East? When one of your casual boxing fans asks you, you say, it's the money. It's just gone for the money. This one, we can't say it's for the money. It's because one of the fighters involved can't fight in his own country because he hasn't cleared himself with the board in this country because he's failed a drugs test. That for me just really puts a cloud over this fight, and I can't get behind it, to be honest.
It's crazy, you know. I'm not gonna lie. When this fight was talked about in October, I was kind of getting into it. I was.
Yeah, so was I.
It had the market. It did the Benn Eubank. You were intrigued by it, and then all that came out. And the way Conor Benn behaved around it just left a bad taste in, I think, everyone's mouth, because he really showed his lack of awareness, lack of intelligence, the whole thing. And as you said, he's not been proven innocent. The WBC cannot exonerate someone, and all they kind of said, and that, in fact, actually, they contradicted, apparently, his own dossier.
Exactly.
So, and he's not refuted that. So it's an absolute, it's all over the place. You know, I like it at the Conor Benn being found. There's a body, there's the knife in your hand and blood in your top, but he turns around and says, but there's no CCTV, you can't prove it. It's like, we know you did it, mate. So just give it a rest.
Yeah.
It's almost like he's being rewarded in a way. What would you call it, reward? But it's like all those discretions he's done, you know, with the drug test, multiple drug tests, and he's getting a big fight for it. And he can't even have it in his own home country. And it wasn't just that. You were hearing Pacquiao, Brook, Broner, Eubank, these names, and it's like, what the fuck? Why?
Yeah, and it's Chris Eubank. The fight, like you say, when it was in October, I almost got bought into the novelty of it, and I started to actually look forward to seeing what was going to happen. You know, Eubank having to sort of kill himself to make the weight, and obviously Benn coming up, and just all of those things made me interested in the fight. But I now look at it that Chris Eubank has been taken out by Liam Smith. And the one thing we've always said about Chris Eubank is he's got some chin on him, as regardless of the fact he's not good, regardless of the fact he always falls short at the top level, he's got his father's chin, he's got his father's warrior spirit, all that types of stuff. That's now been proven that if he's still cut into 160 and also the back-to-back training camps, I think may have depleted him, but who knows? He could just be done at 160. So we're now getting a guy in the ring that's coming off a big knockout defeat to a guy that's not even a big puncher at 160. It wasn't even a massive puncher at 154. So we got that guy who looks a little bit vulnerable at the minute, going in with a guy that failed 2 drugs tests and hasn't proven himself innocent. It just doesn't read well for me, and I just can't look forward to that. And like you say, I don't get this logic with Conor. What does he get from fighting Manny Pacquiao? He can only look bad coming from it. If he destroys Pacquiao in a round, no one says anything about it. It's like, I don't get what this matchmaking it. And I can understand that you want to have this commercial value, you want to build up his name a little bit, but the fights itself, if he really wants to position himself to challenge Spence, Crawford, then the next gen in Ortiz and Boots, he's going to get absolutely annihilated because this opposition is so far removed from the top of the welterweight division at the minute. What's going to happen? I could tell I'm getting angry. But
I'll believe me, you and me both. No, for me, it's Eddie Hearn's not going to admit this. Obviously, it's his fighter, but deep down, Eddie Hearn must know Conor Benn ain't winning no world titles. He ain't beating the Spence. He ain't beating the Boots. But he's name value. People watch him. People are going to want to see him lose. I can make money off him. So why am I going to put him in with a Spence and Boots? Why am I even going to get him a world title shot when he'll only get obliterated? Even if he's on God knows why, he'll still get obliterated. I'm going to make some money off him. That's all I can think of. That's the only logical reason. You know, he had the Pacquiaos because he'd make money off that. He's doing Eubank Jr. He's going to make money off it. They'll sell the you-know-what out of it. You know, the gloves are off. It'll be, you failed the drugs test. You got knocked out. They'll just try and build it up they'll go out on steroids almost. No,
Yeah.
steroids Conor Benn, but you know what I mean. They'll sell it like that almost because they'll just try and get people just talk about, look at the needle between these two guys. Benn Eubank, they hate one another and this. That's all they're going to do. They're just trying to make money. Eddie Hearn's not going to turn around and say Conor Benn's not good enough to win a world title, which we all know he isn't.
Yeah.
He's going to turn around and say, oh, this is just one way on a stepping stone or road to become a world champion. We know that's not going to happen. And we know even if he was mandated to fight a Boots Ennis, Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn, well, maybe Conor Benn's not the sharpest. Eddie Hearn would probably tell him, oh, you don't need to fight him. You need to fight Manny Pacquiao instead. He's tougher. And Conor Benn, not being the sharpest, would be like, yeah, you're right. Who's Boots Ennis?
I honestly think the build up to this fight, you'll see a very different narrative around it. The first time, I think it was about the rivalry between their fathers, the legacy of Benn Eubank, and it being in London. And I think it was very much an extension of the rivalry that their fathers created all them years ago. This time, I think it's going to be made out to be very personal. The fathers won't be mentioned as much. They won't be included in the promotion as much. We won't see these clips that go back and show the similarities between them and their sons. This will be purely about, as you said, you failed a drugs test, you've just been knocked out, and it will become a back and forth and a personal battle, and it will be built on their beef for each other. The first time around, it was all built on the rivalry of their fathers and that pre-existing legacy. This time, you won't see that. It's going over to the middle. You'll see that it'll be more about how angry they can get in a face-off, how they push each other at a press conference, and things like that. And I think they'll look to change the narrative around this fight to try and sell it more.
That will sell it, though. That's the 100%. Thing, though. That will sell it. People will enjoy that. Like, I'm not going to lie, right? I'd watch that gloves are off 100% because it'd be just compelling viewing. So, in a way, you can kind of see for Eddie Hearn and Conor Benn from Chris Eubank Jr., Kellis Ireland, why wouldn't we do this? Makes way more sense. And probably for Team Eubank, they see this fight as more winnable than Liam Smith at this point. Liam Smith just ironed him out in 4 rounds. Conor Benn is still a small welterweight. He's been out of the ring for 16 months, give or take, when this fight comes about. And full 160, not back-to-back training camps, no rehydration. Eubank's got to fancy this.
Yeah, and I mean, the only thing for Eubank, and in my own video, I did go at Conor Benn a little bit, went at Eddie Hearn a little bit, but I made it quite clear as well that I don't think Chris Eubank Jr. is kind of void of any kind of blame in this as well. That throughout his career, he's always perhaps positioned himself to challenge eventually for world titles or for the biggest fights. Obviously, when he has done, he's fallen short. But after the Liam Williams fight, it felt like he could probably position himself to mount a title charge potentially, and there were some other opportunities there. But instead of doing that, it became, shall I fight Kell Brook? Shall I fight Liam Smith? Shall I fight Conor Benn? And I just think for Chris Eubank, I think back to what his father was renowned for and kind of the warrior that he was. If he'd have got ironed out that quickly in 4 rounds by Liam Smith in a fight that he was the favourite, I think that rematch clause would have been activated and he'd gone back in there trying to win that fight and would have actually
100%.
showed some ambition. It just shows for Junior that I think he really does not care about anything other than a pound note. And it kind of speaks to his career in the sense that I don't think he's ever actually shown any ambition at all. And I think that's why he likes this fight even more so than Liam Smith.
You go back to even before the Golovkin fight, wasn't he mandatory for Danny Jacobs when Jacobs was regular champion with the WBA? And he showed zero ambition in that fight. It was just try and get the easiest, biggest money fights. You can fight Danny Jacobs. Oh, hell no. No. I'll fight whoever apart from that. I'll go back down to British level.
Yep, exactly. And look, if Eubank goes and beats Conor Benn in June, it will then turn to the Kell Brook fight. He won't go back to Liam Smith, who's the guy that he's ultimately got to prove it against. So I think it speaks to them. And I also think the promoters have shown that integrity isn't very much in this sport. I know that people say that about Eddie Hearn, but I think Calais as well in this whole scenario, whilst all the misfit stuff goes on in the background as well, I think doesn't cover himself in glory either.
No, what you say there, though, I think he will go back to the Liam Smith fight. However, if he beats Conor Benn, and maybe if he beats Kell Brook, he'll have made an awful lot of money, probably done both of them on pay-per-view. He'll be able to go to the table and say, I'm the A side, 164. Take it or leave it.
Yeah,
I'm the A side now.
It won't be a rematch clause at that point. It would be a whole new set of negotiations.
Exactly.
And knowing what Liam Smith's like, Liam Smith, in that meantime, if he gets offered a world title opportunity, he'll take it because that's the type of fighter Liam Smith is, and he could suffer a defeat in that time to one of the top middleweights or whatever. So Yeah, maybe he does go back to it when that opponent's at their weakest, but that's what Chris Eubank does, right?
That's exactly that's the only thing I can think of, that he's just thinking, I don't fancy fighting him straight away. Maybe I'll have a fight, make a lot of money. Maybe he'll have a fight, lose, and then I can say, well, I'm back to being the A side. So let's do the world title fight. You want a big payday? I want a big payday on my terms.
Yep, exactly.
That's exactly what I think Eubank is trying to do. And if he does beat Conor Benn, well, like, what the fuck? He beating him, for a 147 pounder. It's nothing to write home about. You know, it would be like, for both guys, it would be like Tommy Fury celebrating beating Jake Paul. It's like, you're celebrating like winning a world title, mate. You just beat a flipping YouTuber. It's not even a British. You haven't won a British. It's not even an English title. Seriously,
I do wonder for Conor Benn, like, going into the October date, it almost felt like it was a win-win situation for him. If he was to lose, people go, well, Eubank's 2 weight classes above you, basically, and obviously fought at higher levels, been a pro longer, all those type of things. People would kind of use that narrative, and Ben could go back down to welterweight, still have the same ranking, and just go again, and I think people would move on. But this time, though, you're going to ram home in these the build-up for this fight that, you know, he's just been knocked out by Liam Smith. You've said on Twitter already that you're going to knock him out in 4 rounds. If you don't go and beat Chris Eubank this time, I do think that there is legitimate reason to actually, you know, be critical of Conor Benn if he doesn't win the fight, even if it is at 160, because the narrative's changed now. So I think he needs to win this fight just as much as Chris.
I think if he wins this fight, the first thing people are going to say is, you're having a lot of eggs again. Like, he's not going to be able to shake until he actually goes, I think, and proves and prove he's innocent, especially with the British Boxing Board. That stigma is going to be with him.
Yeah,
it's going to follow him. It's going to follow him like a bad spell almost.
And just if he performs badly in his next fight, people are going to say, "What? So
instantly,
you must be off the juice now, then, because you're not quite what you were in your last few performances." So he better hope that he can still perform without that stuff in his system.
Man, you need an omelette, mate. No, it's boxing is a strange one. It just seems like the things you don't expect end up happening, and the things you expect to happen, for some reason, don't happen.
Yeah,
Fury
that's
Usyk,
why we love it.
Fury Usyk being the classic point. It looks like we're going to get potentially Fury Joyce if he gets by Zhilei Zhang. You know, I like that fight, Zhilei Zhang versus Jojo. I think it's a great fight. I wish I was going over to it. I'm not. But I think it's a great fight. Tremendous fight.
Yeah.
Him against Fury, I want to see undisputed.
Yeah.
That's it for me. However, Fury Joyce, it's not bad. I'll admit it. It's not bad. It's not a bad fight. What are your thoughts?
It's not a bad fight, and I think it's the best alternative outside of Usyk or AJ for Fury. I think obviously he's dealt with Wilder, and I think Joyce is the guy that makes up the rest of the top 5 after those names. So I don't think it's a bad fight. The thing that just frustrates me and would leave a bad taste in my mouth is that I think Usyk is the one here that's hard done by, that he doesn't get the chance to become undisputed, and he's the one that's been hard done by, and I think he's the one that has to take the worse fight, which is the thing that annoys me. I think if Fury does fight Joyce, does a stadium, I think it's a good fight. It's a sellable
big money fight.
People will actually get behind it. Whereas the Dubois fight for Usyk, I honestly think it's borderline bullying because there's such a big gulf in experience and ability, and I just have this. The way I picture the fight is I think Dubois might not actually be able to defend himself at a certain point because it will be that one-sided, because Usyk will have such an advantage. That said, I can understand Dubois taking the opportunity because how many times in your life are you going to get to fight for 3 heavyweight world titles? You know, you may get to challenge for one in the future, but you might not necessarily get the unified version against a fighter as great as Usyk. And, you know, maybe we've seen with Anthony Yard that sometimes if you just throw yourself in the deep end, you might learn to swim a little bit quicker than if you kind of just build yourself up to it. So, but listen, that Kevin Lerena fight didn't read well at all for Daniel Dubois, and I don't like that for Usyk. But Fury Joyce, to go back to your original question, is the best alternative outside of Undisputed. But like you say, Undisputed's in our heart and our minds right now. So the fact we're not getting it just kind of puts a dark cloud over everything.
I know for Frank Warren, you know, I'm sure he's going around spinning this narrative that it's all Usyk, which we all know is complete BS. But for him, he probably doesn't give a damn, because at the end of the day, 3 of the 4 fighters we named there are Queensbury fighters. There's 2 pay-per-views. One of them is going to be in a stadium if it happens, and the other one will definitely, at the very least, OVO or O2 Arena, certainly full, and will do numbers. He doesn't give a shit. He's like, I've got 2 massive pay-per-views. There you go. I could do them one the next month.
Yeah, I think in terms of people that come out of this situation happy, I think it's probably Frank Warren. Listen, you want to put on an undisputed fight, but I mean, were you going to do Usyk at Wembley? You could probably still do Joe Joyce at Wembley if you want to. So you did Dillian White there, and this is a much more compelling fight. So yeah, I think Frank Warren's probably still like, okay, you can get mad at me all you want, but I'm still going to sort of make money off it. So.
And at the end of the day, like, if Joe Joyce was to go in there and beat Fury, well, it's still my fighter.
Still my fighter. If Dubois was to pull off a miracle,
there you go. Yeah,
there you go.
Undisputed like that. So for Warren, he doesn't give it. He doesn't care. You know, I know he'll spin this. Oh, I tried my best. And to be fair, it looked at some points he was, but he doesn't care. He's like, I've got 3 of these 4 fighters. As long as I can make money, as long as I can get a couple of pay-per-views, make some more money, I don't care.
Yeah, I think you're right, though, that Warren, because when him and Eddie Hearn have been trying to work out a deal for AJ Fury in the past, Warren has still been quite vocal during the deal about what's going wrong and what's holding it up and what's been the stumbling block. But throughout these negotiations, he's stayed quiet, or he's just kind of said, we're working on it, we're getting close, and he's remained optimistic. And even at the beginning, when this fight was spoken about after Usyk beat AJ and obviously Fury beat Chisora, etc., you know, he was very much in the camp of, we go to Saudi, it's 50-50. And I think he was on board with Usyk being given what he was owed in this fight. I think it is solely on Tyson for this not happening. So I think Frank doesn't really come out of this looking any worse. I do wish that he hadn't started to put the blame on Usyk. I don't think he needed to do that, because you're going to be working with him anyway, most likely for the Dubois fight, etc. So
it's crap, though. Like, it's not just the case of we're not going to see Undisputed in April. There's a chance we might not see it at all. Like, I don't think we will. I kind of have an idea. Now, it is just an idea. I'm just trying to, thinking outside the box. If I was Alexander Usyk, I was fighting Dubois, I'd deliberately look poor. Because I know I can be. I'd look as slow as molasses. I'd wear flipping rocks in my boots if I had to, just to make Tyson Fury say, oh, yep, he's over the hill. Right, I'll have him. I deliberately, if I could get away with it, I would. I just deliberately look crap as can be.
It's almost a bit like Usyk versus Chisora. Now, people overstate how well Chisora did in that fight, but it wasn't a vintage Usyk performance by any means.
No.
And that was kind of behind closed doors, kind of reduced numbers. And Anthony Joshua was there watching. And obviously the first thing Usyk did afterwards was kind of point over to him and say, Anthony, and kind of let him know that I'm your mandatory. I think AJ at that night would have been thinking, yeah, I'll have a bit of Usyk, thank you very much. And obviously we know what went on to happen. So you're right, it could be some smart tactics to obviously win the fight against Dubois, but don't completely bully him or embarrass him like I'm saying. Maybe make it a little bit difficult, because you might entice Tyson Fury into taking that fight.
That's the only way I can see it happen at this point. That Fury sees enough damage in him and thinks, I've got an easy night here. Okay, yeah. Let's get this fight made. Let's do it. Other than that, it's just not going to happen. And at the end of the day, history's going to look back on Tyson Fury for this.
Yeah, and if it does happen, I'm just not sure whether it happens for Undisputed or not. We know how those belts can kind of bog you down as a 3-belt champion in that division, and the mandatories get called one after the other. It's going to be Dubois, it's going to be Hergovic.
Unless your name's Canelo Alvarez.
Yeah, unless your name's Canelo Alvarez, or even Tyson Fury with the WBC as well for a few years. But, it feels like AJ definitely felt the pressures of that at one point, where he said, we've just got another mandatory, and that's where it can go wrong. And listen, Alexander Usyk, as great as he is, he's getting on, and perhaps something mad just could happen at heavyweight and we lose it. It's the division where something is going to go wrong more likely than any other division, and one punch can change something. So I do wonder if it does happen, both of them still undefeated, but perhaps Usyk's had to drop a belt potentially or something like that.
I hope not. I just want to see Undisputed. That's all I want. And I think it's frustrating because at this point, there is no stumbling blocks.
Yeah, exactly. There was never a
isn't.
better time to make this.
You know, you could always say like with Joshua Wilder and this, oh, what mandatory's getting caught, this, that. There's none.
Yeah,
Just
there's nothing.
flip and make it.
Mhm.
There's no rival networks. It's going to be on BT, end off. There's not like the Zone coming in or Sky are coming in or something. It's going to be on BT, end off. Just fucking do it.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I agree.
clearly not. Clearly not. And I don't want to keep flogging this dead horse. I've done it enough. I've ate off it enough the last fortnight. we'll leave that. We'll leave that for now. So you already kind of answered, but you're not going for it. You don't think we're going to see it.
No, and to be honest, when I went on Ade's channel at the sort of beginning of March, when he asked me, I straight up said I can't see it right now. That was initially, I couldn't see it for April 29th, but now I can't see it. I think the summer, both of them will take different fights, and then I just expect them to again roll into mandatories or whatever else, or circumstances to change. And yeah.
The last couple of times where we've had two champions going for the undisputed, fighting a final eliminator or this, that, or the other, one of them's always lost.
Yeah.
When Wilder, Fury, Joshua, they were like 3 fights in 3 weeks. I said one of them will lose. Joshua lost. When it was Fury, Wilder, and then it was Joshua, Usyk, I was like, one of them will lose. Joshua lost.
Yeah.
If these guys fight, say one fight's the end of June, one fight's the middle of July, I'm going to call it again, third time's the charm, one of them's going to lose.
Yeah, I can see it. I mean, Fury's not as fleet-footed as he used to be. Probably gives you a little bit more opportunity now. Has always been, runs the risk of being put down himself, and Usyk's getting on as well.
Joe Joyce is every bit as good a finisher as Wilder, but he has more tools to knock you out with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the funny thing is with the Joyce Fury fight is the way in which Fury can beat Joyce, I think, is with the foot speed and the movement. But we haven't actually seen that from Tyson in quite a few years now. So how does he stand there and fight with Joe Joyce?
Against Otto Lane, his feet did not look as quick as they had in the past.
Mm-hmm.
And they look even slower against Chisora.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of says it. I think the foot speed from Fury is going. And I think that could be one of the reasons why he's not looking at Alexander Usyk, because Chisora, his feet are as slow as anything, but he was still able to close the distance at times in that fight.
Yeah, I mean, you just look Otto Varlin as the southpaw element, and then you look at Steve Cunningham as the cruiserweight shorter man element. He's spoken about both of those guys giving him issues and him not particularly fancying it. So, Usyk combines both of those things and is a million times better than both of those guys. So, I do think, listen, he's not scared to face Alexander Usyk for the beating that he'll take or the shots that he'll have to eat or anything like that. But he just doesn't fancy the matchup. And that's sometimes true. Sometimes, you'd rather fight someone that's going to walk towards you rather than a guy that you've got to try and land on that's a defensive genius for 12 rounds. Sometimes it can be difficult to fight a Mayweather type opponent. So
I 100% agree. And if StreamYard boots one of us, that's StreamYard being a you-know-what, as it always is. It done that last night, I'll tell you, off air as well, and there was a lot of editing that had to go on with that. That's just StreamYard for you. It never works.
Yeah.
In terms of someone who is looking to take a fight, well, at least he's talking about it. Canelo is fighting Ryder on May the 6th. Now, he has options. I think he's actually got 3 options for September. He's got Dimitri Bivol, which is the toughest. Dave Benavidez, which is the most entertaining and probably the biggest money fight. But Badu Jack is someone people aren't talking about at a cruiserweight. I mean, Canelo must be kicking himself left, right, and centre for not fighting Makabu.
Yeah, I do think the Badu Jack thing is an option. I saw Hearn say that the deal to actually sign to fight Bivol in September is becoming like closer and closer. So I do think he'll go with that plan. But like you say, I think the Badu Jack one is the one that could come out of left field and we don't expect. And then before we know it, we've got Canelo versus Badu Jack. I don't think he takes the Benavidez one this year, to be honest. I can't really see it. I think the Bivol fight's easy to make on DAZN and he'll want to try and right those wrongs. As you mentioned, the Badu Jack fight, he'll probably deem as a slightly easier fight because Badu Jack's not a natural cruiserweight and is definitely at the end of his career as well. The Benavidez one is the one that is actually, for me, I think is as you say, the most entertaining. But for me, it's the biggest fight. I think people really downplay what Benavidez did last week in Las Vegas. The weigh-in was stacked. If anyone's been to the MGM, if you just go and watch the footage, the queue was out the door. It was absolutely rammed in there. The Showtime All Access, any interviews on Fight Week with Benavidez, the highlights afterwards, the arena, the gate revenue, everything was massive last week for Benavidez plant. And if you look at the crowd, most of them were there for Benavidez because they were mostly a Latino and Mexican crowd. So Benavidez is a big name. And if you put Canelo Benavidez in Vegas at the Radius Stadium, that's the biggest fight available for Canelo right now.
On a Mexican holiday as well.
Exactly.
It
Cinco de
would
Mayo.
be massive. If you did it in Mexico, it would be massive. So, and it's a good fight. It's a very good fight as well. From
an awesome
entertainment point of view, you just saw, I can't see a bad fight there. But Canelo is looking at a style of Dimitri Bivol that we know he doesn't like, but yet he's still going and chasing it because he's after legacy.
Yeah. You've got to admire it. But for me, it just almost feels a bit like a pointless exercise, but that's just because I favour Bivol so highly. But I just, fair play to Canelo for wanting that challenge. But as a fan, that Benavidez one for me is the fight I want to see.
You think at 168 is going to affect Bivol in any way?
Potentially. I've seen some rumours now that it could be at 175, which is interesting. Oh, Gman's been kicked, people, so I'm now taking over Gman boxing for the next 5 minutes until he joins back. So, I can see your questions, but I can't show them on screen, so I might have to read them out. Maybe this is a chance to plug my own channel. If you haven't subscribed to me already, go over to Punch Perfect Boxing and subscribe. G-Man will be back in a couple of minutes. If anyone tunes into his live streams, you'll know it boots him about the hour mark. It always tends to kick him, so he's got to join back. I imagine he's punching those floral curtains as we speak. Wonder, is he changing curtains? The new G-Man. I'm not going to do an Irish accent before any of you ask. That's probably my worst accent that I can do. Swear this always happens at some point when you stream together. Yeah, it's never me, is it? It's always G that gets booted. So I'm sure he'll be back in 2 secs. There we go.
Don't you just love StreamYard? Don't you just love StreamYard? It's just flipping brilliant. Whoever invented it is just a legend, isn't he?
They've been calling me a pound shop G, man. I'm not having it.
What the fuck? Me and you, we're good at our own things. We're good at our own things. Pound shop G, man. Jeez, they call me a pound shop Addy, probably. No, you were saying you heard a rumour. What's the rumour? You decided to kick me just before you came up with the rumour about the Bivol Canelo rematch.
Yeah, so the thing I was reading that it would now be at 175, and I'm wondering that because I'm wondering if Canelo's thought, well, if I lose at 175, I can just go back down and still be undisputed, and there's fights to make. If you lose undisputed to Bivol, I'm not convinced Bivol actually stays at 168 after that, and he would probably move back up and just let those belts scatter. I think Canelo's probably realised it makes sense to go up to his weight class, lose at his weight class, and come back down and still have all those belts.
I think that at 175 or 168, chances are Bivol gets the job done either way.
I think he wins. Maybe even more comfortably than last time, to be honest. I genuinely believe that.
The only thing I'm worried about is if that Canelo was a little bit busier, because we saw how crazy those scorecards were, that judges might just turn around and say, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I was at the fight, so when those scorecards were read out, I was like, what the hell is going on? But
more than when I seen the scorecards, four of the first 5 rounds were given to Canelo. Like, what? Rounds where he was getting just completely outboxed.
I know Canelo's the A side and he is the biggest name in boxing, but I do think this time the scoring would be a little bit fairer. It almost kind of reminds me of what happened. And again, I'm not saying Kambosos is Canelo's level by any means, but when Haney went over against Kambosos, that first fight, he lost at best 2 rounds in that first fight. And I think most of the judges gave Kambosos 4. In the rematch, you just saw that the judges were like, he dominated the first one. There's no reason to even try and rob him this time. We're just going to give Haney everything. I do think Bivol, if he does just dominate this fight, then I think he'll probably get a little bit of a fairer decision.
I think so too. I think it'll be a 116, 112, 170, 111 scorecard type job.
Yeah,
and Canelo is look, if he loses twice to Bivol, so be it. Look at his resume. Look at the depth of Canelo's resume.
Yeah.
He's only 32 still. I think he's been around forever. He's been fighting at the top level since he was 20. Nearly
Yeah.
13 years he's been fighting at world level.
Mhm.
Baldomir, I think, was his first test. That was 2010.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like, seriously, most fighters, when they get to world level, they stick around for 5-6 years, maybe 7 at a push. He's been around for over a decade.
Yeah, he's been around a long time now.
It's crazy, mate. It's absolutely crazy. I've gone just over an hour, right? So, you know me, I like the streams to be around the hour kind of bracket. So I'm probably going to call it there. 2 things. One, Punch Perfect Boxing just hit 6K. I see that there.
Mm-hmm.
So I was hoping to get him over the 6K mark in here, but he actually got it just before we came on. So thanks for, well, at least we can try and get him to 7K as quick as we can.
Exactly.
So Punch Perfect Boxing, that's all you need to type in. I haven't pinned to the top of the comment or the top of the chat. But Jamie, mate, tell them a bit about what you do, and I'll let you final thoughts on this. Let's close this out.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Gman. First and foremost, appreciate it as always, and thanks to everyone in the chat for being engaging and getting involved as always. And any super chat, keep supporting Gman because he's one of the best out there. In terms of my own channel, I'm basically just doing what Gman does and cover all the boxing. One thing I try to do to make my channel a little bit different from the rest is cover the lower weight classes. So I cover a lot of fights over in Japan, in Thailand, in the Philippines, even the ones that take place in Mexico as well. So try to shine a light on perhaps, I know in boxing, as we mentioned earlier, it can be very confusing staying up to date with it all. And there's some weight classes where they're abroad and they are difficult to follow. So I'll try and keep everyone updated with that.
Mate, you're doing a great job on it as well. I think as we both are. In terms of everything else, if you could, lads, on the way out, smash the like button. I'm not too far off 11K. I think I've only got about 40 subs off 11K. So please, if you haven't already, give me boys subscribe. Let me get to 11K. We're getting one step closer. 20K is the next hurdle, bro, man. That's what I want to get to. But lads, appreciate y'all locking in. Thank you so much. It's been a good fun, man. We have to do this. We shouldn't let it go more than a couple of months next time. Because it's fun. Whenever we do these, the hour just, you're looking at the clock, you're like, what? It's been an hour already? 100%. It's always fantastic. Thanks for coming on, mate. Lads, I'll leave it there. I'll have a chat to you for a bit backstage, but for now, I'll leave it there. Peace, lads. Cheers, mate. Thanks for that.